seem to branch out more with who you talk to. Like I've seen you have, the podcast with Brignole, a few of those, and then with Kassem, even Joel Seedman, and all of that. And I'm just wondering if I think, and even Greg Doucette, right? So it's some people who, and I think it gets you more exposure, obviously, but it also gets different viewpoints out there. And I think that debate is good. Do you find that was something that you had to almost force yourself to do a little bit if with some people who you maybe disagree with your views, or was it just kind of a natural, like, I like to debate, I like to see these different viewpoints?
I love to debate. There was no forcing at all. I have to regularly force myself not to debate people. So that was just opening up the floodgates a little bit. So it was really fun. And some of those things happened kind of very sporadically. So the Joel Seedman thing, Mark Bell just texted me out of the blue and he was like, "Hey, we got Joel Seedman, like literally in the studio. Do you want to call in and debate him?" I was like, "Is he okay with that?" He's like, "Yeah, why not?" I was like, "Okay." Yeah. So I just did that pretty fast. But the other ones were set up a little bit ahead of time. And mostly the way these things happen is, I'll say some things on the internet to have some of my views pretty public and, about training and things like that. And then these other folks have views about training that are difficult for people to reconcile, maybe because they're irreconcilable. And so, most people have a pretty decent grasp of intuitive philosophy. And they sort of think, well, if one person that's, saying one thing and another person saying another thing, we can't all be necessarily correct to the same degree, or at least applied to the same space, the identical problems. So maybe one of these folks is more correct than the other, or at the very least, we will learn a lot more nuance about the issue if both of them seem fairly, in the know.
Yeah.
And people kind of ask for it. So I never really go after anybody. I'm not like messaging people and be like, "Let's get a debate going." I don't know if I've ever done that. But people will message, RP, and they'll message Revive, and they'll comment, say, "Hey, you should talk to XYZ person." We did have to go after Greg, get him to debate me, because he was not interested in debating anybody who had an insufficiently large YouTube presence, because he was exclusively interested in raising his brand awareness.
Right.
So finally we got Omar Isuf. It's big enough for him, and he hosted the debate.
Right. Well, when I remember, and I was going to ask about that, because at the time it was kind of a weird situation where I think people in our smaller community knew Greg Doucette and kind of knew your background, but people who were new to it, I think you had some issue there where people thought maybe you were being a little like a jerk or something like that, right? There was some backlash there, and you were like, "Well, hold on a minute, like there was more to this story." So, and yeah. It seems like you guys have since had good interactions, but that's what I was going to ask is, do you find that you have to temper yourself at times, given that it's a public forum and some people are maybe new to your views? I would imagine the answer is yes. There's probably an initial thought of whatever direct thing you would want to say. And in some of these situations with such a large audience, you do have to temper what you say.
I've debated a lot of people before I debated Greg. I've debated a lot of people after I debated Greg. And I usually use the same style. And that is one of open and congenial engagement and question asking, trying to get to the truth. I used an intentionally different style with Greg because he had made several videos criticizing me and my positions in a sort of like a personal way. He was trying to insult me, and he never did it sort of face to face. He would just do it in YouTube videos. And I said, "Well, let's bring the shit face to face." So when we got face to face, I just decided to insult him for an hour and a half intellectually. Most of the insults went considerably over his head. Certainly at the time did not know much about what we were talking about, it turns out. But it did make me look mean, accurate. I was intending to be mean. It was really funny, though, how many of the Greg Doucette supporters at the time were perfectly fine with him, digging into people on his own channel and making fun of everyone and calling them stupid. But so all of a sudden, they're like, right. Big Mike Israetel the bully straight to Greg's face. It really is, So those folks I can understand because they're already fans of his. folks coming in not knowing what's what clearly would side with him because he seemed to be the nicer guy of the two of us.
Right.
He seemed to be more open-minded than I was, and I was definitely trying to drive something home. So I kind of looked like a dick, accurately, I might add. But they didn't know the sort of situation beforehand where I was on a few other podcasts being interviewed about his positions. I was very, very cordial and very kind. And he just replied to those videos, making his own videos, very uncordial and unkind. So I was like, fuck it, let's just take it straight to him. I did. And that people thought was mean. Anyone who was up on the history had a very different opinion of that discussion.
Yeah, sure.
They thought that Greg had it coming. And I mean, on the technical points, I think I probably was at least 10-1 in my favor. So that was cool. But it turns out people just didn't like the mean guy thing.
Sure.
And so from then on, I figured, if I'm going to be going after people that I think are saying things that are significantly false, then I had better do it in the arguing to convince style, which I actually have videos about. And that is a style in which I'm just let people explain their position, and I ask them pointed questions. And that eventually, if the position is false, they get into holes they can't dig themselves out of. And that makes them look like they don't know things. And in fact, they don't. So, and if they can explain their position very well and find a grain of truth, I'm always into being like, yeah, that's actually a really good point.